The small wooden cross above the mantel was older than their marriage. Samuel had carved it himself during their first year together, his clumsy hands whittling away at the block of oak until something holy emerged. He wasn't much of a craftsman, but she had kissed him on the cheek the day he hung it, whispering, "It's perfect. Our home will always be covered in prayer." And so, for 7 years, that cross looked down upon their lives. 7 years of whispered prayers in the early dawn. 7 years of holding hands before meals. 7 years of kneeling beside the bed at night, thanking God for blessings and asking Him to keep them close. It became the rhythm of their love. Every morning Samuel rose first. His bones creaked a little more each year, but he liked it that way, the quiet moments before the world stirred. He would pad across the wooden floor, careful not to wake her too soon, and set the kettle to boil. 2 mugs, always the same, hers with 2 sugars, his black. The steam curled between them as he read from the Psalms, his voice soft and steady. She listened, or at least he thought she did. She bowed her head, closed her eyes, murmured Amen at the right moments. And when they finished, he would look at her, love swelling in his chest, and think, "God has been good to me." In the evenings, when exhaustion pulled at his body from long hours of work, it was prayer that revived him. She would curl beside him on the couch, her head against his shoulder, and he'd whisper gratitude for the roof over their heads, the food on their table, the gift of each other. Samuel never questioned it, not once. He was not a man of grand gestures, but he believed in consistency. He believed in showing up day after day, even when the world frayed at the edges. That was what love meant to him, steady, unwavering, faithful. And for years it seemed enough. But time has a way of shifting things when you're not looking. It began with little changes. She stayed out later, saying she was catching up with old friends or taking extra shifts. She laughed less during their evening prayers, her amens shorter, distracted. She spent more time scrolling on her phone, less time looking into his eyes. Samuel noticed, of course, but he told himself it was just a season. Work stress, perhaps, a phase. After all, hadn't they weathered storms before? Faith was a rope they both held. He tightened his grip when hers loosened, believing she'd pull back in time. But then came the night everything unraveled. It was a Wednesday, ordinary and forgettable until it was. Samuel had finished late at the office. He checked his phone, no message from her. But he remembered she had mentioned dinner at a restaurant downtown, something casual, and so he made his way there, eager to surprise her. The lights inside glowed warmly, laughter and clinking glasses filling the air. He spotted her at once. Her hair caught the light as she leaned forward across the table, smiling. At a man who wasn't him. Samuel slowed, his heart stumbling. For a moment he thought, perhaps a colleague, perhaps a friend. But the way the man's arm draped across the back of her chair said otherwise. The way she looked at him, eyes bright, cheeks flushed, it was the kind of gaze she hadn't given Samuel in a long time. Gathering himself, Samuel approached. "Sam," she said quickly, her smile flickering like a candle in wind. "This is Daniel, a friend." Daniel didn't rise, didn't extend a hand. He simply nodded, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. Samuel forced a polite smile. "Nice to meet you." His voice sounded foreign, too calm for the storm gathering in his chest. They ate, or rather they pushed food around their plates while tension thickened the air. Daniel laughed too easily at her jokes. She touched his arm when she spoke. Samuel's hands shook under the table. And then, as if the evening weren't cruel enough, she delivered the final blow. "You know, Sam," she said, her tone mocking in its sweetness, "you've really let yourself go, old and fat." Her laughter rang out, joined by Daniel's smug chuckle. The words pierced deeper than any knife. Samuel sat frozen, face burning, his breath caught in his throat. He tried to smile, tried to swallow it down, but the humiliation was too heavy. He excused himself. His voice trembled as he mumbled something about needing air, and he walked out before the tears spilled. the city streets blurred under the glow of street lamps. He wandered aimlessly, her words echoing with every step, old and fat, old and fat. By the time he reached home, his chest felt hollow. He sat at the table, the Bible still open from that morning. He stared at the words, but they swam before his eyes. His prayers, usually so sure, crumbled into fragments. Why God? Why her? Why now? The house, once filled with warmth, felt like a stranger's dwelling. The cross above the mantel seemed to mock him, its shadow long and unyielding. When she returned later that night, he didn't ask where she'd been. He already knew. But the silence between them was deafening. For the first time in 7 years, they did not pray together before bed. The morning after that humiliating dinner, Samuel rose out of habit. His body knew the motions even when his spirit didn't. He filled the kettle, set 2 mugs on the table, and reached for the worn leather Bible. The pages rustled under his fingers, but the words brought no comfort. She did not join him. He waited, the steam curling from the mugs, but the bedroom door remained closed. After a while, the coffee went cold. Samuel closed the Bible and sat in silence, staring at the cross above the mantel. That day at work, his mind wandered. Numbers blurred on spreadsheets. Meetings passed without his notice. His colleagues' voices sounded muffled, distant. At lunch, when he caught sight of his reflection in a glass window, he paused. The roundness of his face, the sag of his shoulders, the gray threading through his beard, it was all he could see. Old and fat. The words replayed like a curse. By the time he returned home, she was already gone again. It went on like this for days. Her absences lengthened, her excuses thinned. Samuel's patience wore away until only pain remained. Finally, one evening, when she came through the door smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't his, he could no longer stay silent. "Who is he?" His voice was low, steady, but his heart pounded. She froze, her hand still on the doorknob. "Sam." "Don't lie." Her lips pressed together. She dropped her bag on the floor and crossed her arms. "Daniel." "How long?" "A few months," she admitted, her tone clipped, defensive. "Maybe longer, I don't know anymore." Samuel's chest tightened. "And all this time you prayed with me, every morning, every night." She looked away. "I did it because it mattered to you, not because it mattered to me." The words struck harder than a slap. He swallowed, fighting to keep his voice calm. "So all those years, you never believed." "I believed once," she said sharply. "But then things changed, you changed. Everything felt routine. I wanted more. More than faith, more than me. More than feeling stuck," she snapped. Silence stretched. Samuel felt something inside him shatter. She left a week later. No tearful goodbyes, no attempt at reconciliation. She packed her things, one bag at a time, until her side of the closet was bare. Then she walked out the door, shutting it with a finality that echoed through the house. Samuel stood in the empty bedroom, staring at the dent her pillow left behind. He sat on the edge of the bed and lowered his face into his hands. For the first time in 7 years, he prayed alone. But the prayer was jagged, raw, barely words at all. "God, what do I do? How do I live with this ache?" The days that followed blurred into one another. He dragged himself to work, ate tasteless meals, and returned to an empty house. At night, the silence pressed in on him, heavy and suffocating. He replayed her laughter in that restaurant, the way she looked at Daniel. He heard her voice calling him old and fat, and shame dug its claws deeper. He stopped answering friends' calls. He stopped opening the Bible. The cross above the mantel became unbearable to look at, so he turned it toward the wall. Weeks passed. One morning, restless from a night of tossing and turning, Samuel laced up his old sneakers and stepped outside. The air was crisp, the sky streaked with the pale light of dawn. He began to walk. At first, just a block. His knees protested, his breath came quick, but something in the rhythm soothed him. The next morning he walked again, a little further this time, then again the next day. The walks became his new prayers. Each step pounded out the anger, the grief, the humiliation. He whispered into the wind not words of devotion but fragments of longing. Help me. Heal me. Don't let me stay broken. Slowly, something began to shift. His body, neglected for years, responded to the movement. The heaviness lessened. His breath grew steadier. His shoulders straightened. When he caught his reflection again in a shop window, he didn't wince. He saw a man carrying pain, yes, but also a man still moving forward. His friends noticed too. One of them, Mark, cornered him after church one Sunday. "You've been quiet," Mark said gently. "We've missed you." Samuel hesitated. "I didn't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Mark replied. "Just come." And so Samuel began meeting them again. Coffee on Saturdays. Bible study on Wednesdays. At first he sat silent, but gradually he joined in. Laughter returned, hesitant at first, then freer. Prayer returned too, but it was different now. No longer a ritual spoken for someone else's sake. Now it was raw and honest. Sometimes he prayed through tears, sometimes through silence, but he prayed. Months passed. His body grew leaner. His heart, though scarred, began to mend. He cooked for himself, roasted vegetables, grilled fish. He rediscovered the joy of reading, the comfort of music. He even smiled more often, though he never noticed when he did. And then, one autumn afternoon, he met her. Ileana. She was at the library, her arms full of donated books. A paperback slipped from her grasp, landing at his feet. Samuel bent to pick it up, their hands brushing briefly as he handed it back. "Thank you," she said, her smile warm, her eyes kind. "It's no trouble," he replied. They exchanged a few words about books, about the event, about the weather. Simple, forgettable things. But when he walked away, Samuel found himself smiling. The next week he saw her again. This time they talked longer, about their favorite authors, about the city, about life. Weeks turned into months. Their conversations deepened. Ileana listened in a way that made Samuel feel seen, truly seen. She laughed with him, not at him. She never demanded, never mocked. She simply accepted him. One evening, as they walked by the river, she said softly, "You carry a lot. I can see it." Samuel's throat tightened. "I've been broken." She slipped her hand into his. "And yet you're still here. Sometimes broken pieces let the light through." Tears blurred his eyes. He didn't hide them. For the first time in years, he felt safe enough not to. With Ileana, he didn't feel old or fat or unworthy. He felt human, valuable, loved. And slowly, Samuel realized the truth. His story wasn't about betrayal. It was about resilience. It wasn't about humiliation. It was about grace. The cross above his mantle no longer mocked him. It shone quietly, reminding him that even from ashes, something beautiful could rise. Winter melted into spring, and with it Samuel's life seemed to thaw. Where once there had been silence and shadows, there was now warmth and laughter. His mornings still began with prayer, but they no longer carried the ache of loneliness. Instead, they carried gratitude, gratitude for breath in his lungs, for strength in his steps, for the unexpected presence of Ileana. She had a way of drawing light into dark spaces. Samuel noticed it first at the library, where children gathered around her as if she carried sunshine in her smile. He noticed it at the cafe when she leaned across the table, listening intently as though his words mattered more than the noise around them. And he noticed it most when he felt weakest. When grief crept back unbidden, she never told him to stop hurting. She simply held his hand, steady and sure, as though to remind him he wasn't alone. One evening, Samuel invited her to his home for dinner. He cooked carefully, herbed chicken, roasted potatoes, steamed greens. He set the table with care, lit a single candle and prayed before the meal, not out of habit but out of joy. As they ate, Ileana's gaze lingered on the cross above the mantel. "Did you carve that?" she asked softly. Samuel's hand tightened briefly on his fork. "Yes, years ago. I almost took it down once." Her eyes returned to his. "But you didn't." No, he exhaled slowly. I thought it mocked me. Now I think it kept me alive. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. Sometimes what feels like mockery is just a reminder that the story isn't over yet. Samuel swallowed hard, his heart swelling with something tender and unfamiliar, hope that no longer hurt. In the weeks that followed, his transformation deepened. He continued his morning walks, now joined sometimes by Eliana. She matched his pace easily, pointing out blooming flowers, pausing to greet neighbors, her laughter mingling with birdsong. At work, colleagues began to comment on the change. "You look younger, Sam," one said. "What's your secret?" Samuel only smiled, just walking more, living more. Yet beneath the progress, a lingering wound remained. The memory of her, his ex-wife. The woman he had prayed beside for 7 years. Her laughter with Daniel, her sharp words, the humiliation. It haunted him still, though less fiercely than before. And Samuel knew, deep down, that until he let it go, he would never be fully free. The chance came unexpectedly. One Sunday afternoon, as he left the church, he saw her across the street. She stood beside Daniel, her hand looped through his arm. Time slowed. She looked older somehow, not in her face but in her eyes. The shine he remembered was gone, replaced by something weary. Their gazes met. She stiffened. Then, with Daniel distracted on his phone, she crossed the street. "Sam," she said quietly, almost uncertain. He nodded once, "Hello." For a moment neither spoke. Then she sighed, "You look different." Samuel tilted his head. "Healthier, maybe." She bit her lip, her eyes flicking down. "I was cruel to you. That night at the restaurant, I shouldn't have said those things." Samuel inhaled slowly, steadying himself. The old wound tugged, but it no longer bled. "Yes, you were cruel," he said simply. She winced. But he added, "I forgive you." Her eyes widened. "You what?" "I forgive you," Samuel repeated. "Not for your sake, for mine. I can't carry it anymore." Silence stretched. She blinked rapidly as if words failed her. Then she whispered, "Thank you." Samuel offered a faint smile. "Goodbye." He turned, walking away before the past could claw him back. That night, he told Eliana what had happened. She apologized. Eliana asked gently, "Yes, and you forgave her?" "I had to." Samuel's voice softened. "I don't want to live in that prison anymore." Eliana's hand slipped into his. "That's strength, Sam, real strength." For the first time, the memory of his ex-wife's laughter didn't sting. It simply drifted away, a ghost finally released. The months that followed were rich with small joys. Samuel and Eliana cooked together, read aloud in the evenings, planted herbs in the backyard. They attended church together, prayed together. But this time the prayers were different. They weren't rituals spoken out of obligation. They were living, breathing conversations with God, filled with gratitude, honesty, and hope. On the anniversary of the day his ex had left, Samuel woke before dawn. He lit a candle beneath the cross, now polished and straight. He whispered a prayer not of grief, but of thanksgiving. "Thank you for the years that broke me. Thank you for the pain that taught me. Thank you for the grace that found me." Eliana came into the room, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "You're up early." "Just remembering," Samuel said softly. And grateful." She kissed his shoulder, resting her head against him. Samuel smiled, a deep, quiet smile that reached his soul. He was not old, he was not fat, he was not finished. He was alive, alive with love, alive with faith, alive with the knowledge that brokenness was not the end. The story of his life was no longer one of humiliation. It was one of resilience, forgiveness, and grace. And as he stood with Eliana in the soft light of morning, Samuel knew. The happiest endings are not the ones you expect. They are the ones you build from ashes, with hands that refuse to stop reaching for the light.